Okay, so thank you for those who are sticking around for this session, this second paper. I'll be presenting this session on behalf of my colleagues again, and it's a position paper on evaluation and assessment needs of computing education in the primary grades. So this paper emerged out of a 2019 ISA workshop hosted by Monica McGill and Adrian Decker, and they brought together 26 experienced evaluators, educators, researchers, and other stakeholders to investigate evaluation and assessment needs across CS education. So in the workshop, participants were grouped into one of their selected areas based on expertise and interests. So this included primary, secondary, tertiary, and teacher training. And this paper is based on the K-5 group findings. And here on the slide are the members and the authors of this paper. So a participatory research approach was adopted for this, utilising self-directed focus group discussions, engaging the participants in the analysis and the writing of results with our co-author Monica McGill, who was also the facilitator. And we had one lead member in the group and a scribe. We also used a combination of collaborative documents and post-its to share and organise our ideas. And although it's not a formal study, these processes were followed to add strength to the results of the discussion. These collaborative efforts that bring stakeholders together around a focused agenda can really help accelerate the process of curriculum implementation, and it's through that shared expertise and generation of resources. So although there are challenges associated with developing evaluations and assessments across contexts, countries or even states, there are benefits in terms of developing high-level strategic research aims and goals that can inform local work. So in this group, we sought to answer what are the current gaps and challenges in evaluating and assessing academic achievement of K-5 students in computer science, and what are the ways that the CS education community can really rise to meet those needs. So we explored the topic over one day, and here on the slide we have that we went through identifying strengths and weaknesses in evaluation and assessment within our own communities and a more broader CS education community. We also looked at identifying and prioritising assessments and needs, and then looking at how we can really come up with some strategies and solutions around those needs. There was also a process of sharing and feedback throughout the day, so that across and between the groups we were identifying common themes and were able to also provide that feedback and input. So before starting, our group really felt that it was important to understand our scope and key language. So what did we mean by assessment and evaluation? So here we were looking at two primary paradigms, the evaluation of student learning and observing what's happening in the classroom. So we consider assessment as encompassing that in-class, ongoing, formative and summative assessment about student learning that's undertaken by teachers and researchers, looking at external assessments like exams that are undertaken outside of schools. We looked at evaluation of student learning, the teachers, processes and programs to determine the impacts on student learning. And we also considered the cognitive but also the non-cognitive factors. So what are our communities doing? Some members reported that their country, state or workplace was not in the process of formally assessing or evaluating primary CS education, but things were still happening. And we can see there was also discussion around, for example, in Australia, we were undergoing a period of transition where teachers were moving from not having to assess to now assessing. And the group shared a number of current formal and informal methods of evaluation and assessment being adopted by members in the group, their colleagues, or the broader community of teachers and researchers. And some of these are shown here on the slide. So we were able to group these as being focused around assessment and evaluation on programming or CS project work, problem solving in CS, written work, general assessment practices, and approaches for research purposes. So with the exception of strategies specifically designed for CS education, such as the Bebrus computational thinking challenges, we found that many types and approaches were actually well used across primary education, such as observation, quizzes and tests, rubrics, and cognitive interviewing. So what did we identify as our weaknesses and needs? Discussions emerged around current evaluation and assessment practices, that were very programming focused, which isn't a bad thing. But we also expressed a need to expand work into the primary years to include a broader focus of computer science curricula. And there were several related topics that were raised as deemed important to explore further, including those trajectories and determining how interventions are impacting on student learning, looking at knowledge of an intermediate programming concept, so moving beyond introductory programming, looking at non-cognitive factors at the early years, particularly looking at how you do that with pre-literate or early literacy students, and then looking at how curriculum impacts on those factors. We were also keen to look at whether students experience curriculum in culturally relevant ways, so looking from a research perspective, and looking at different approaches for different ages. And we know that K-5 can be quite different to high school and tertiary environments. We also raised the idea of looking at thinking about the impact of user experiences and interfaces on students, and how that comes to play in terms of both the offline and the online environments. So even when they're playing with tangible games around computational thinking, how can we actually assess that? So reflecting on these gaps and challenges, we were able to categorise those as concerning research, learning and teaching, or both. And it was quite apparent that there's a clear need to bring together educators and researchers with systematic and infrastructure support to work on solving these challenges together. So what are the priority areas that we can focus on first? So following our discussion around those gaps and challenges, we collectively brainstormed top priorities for CS education community. We organised our priorities into two general areas, which were the construct areas and methods and tools. Constructs included items like culturally and relevant assessment and evaluation, advancing our understanding of measurements required for early learners, and the coverage of broad curriculum topics beyond programming. We had areas related to methods and tools, which included establishing that really strong foundational work, such as a universal taxonomy of assessment, looking at the use and reuse of existing and new tools to assess students, and capturing contextual data and how we might facilitate that to inform our understanding of students and their learning experiences. Due to time constraints in the session, we could have talked all day about some solutions and ideas and strategies, but our group really decided to dive deep on three top priorities that were nominated by the group. And our group came up with practical processes and strategies based on our expertise and experiences and through discussion. And they're outlined in detail in the paper, but here we'll just touch on them briefly. So the first key priority we thought was to establish a universal taxonomy of assessment, including both cognitive and non-cognitive factors for K-5 learners. And this taxonomy would address key elements, including knowledge and skills, processes and product assessment, and their growth and mastery over time. So a synthesis of existing instruments, frameworks and learning sequences used by both teachers and researchers could really lay that foundation for informing the development of this space. And there's some fantastic work emerging from our community, for example, by Shuchi Grover, who's leading an assessment project at the moment for K-12. We also looked at contributors in this space should really include a diverse, multidisciplinary international team so that we can make sure it's universal. This work should also look at resulting in the updating of existing primary school resources and expanding on them so that we're not just repeating and creating new things, but really ensuring that all the resources are supported. We perceived the need to address culturally relevant assessment and evaluation as a high priority, and over the development of a one-size-fits-all solution, supporting many initiatives and their great work, such as the CS for All movement, to ensure that learners are included and that we're addressing diverse needs. This should not only inform the customisation for different contexts, but it's also essential that they take into account the diversity of the learners. So we really recommended, in the end, bringing together international experts in equality, culturally and linguistically relevant teaching. And we thought that they could lead the initiative in driving this space and also driving those researcher practitioner partnerships, such as those happening in the US, So the goals of this would be really to determine what culturally relevant sustained pedagogy, evaluation and assessment looks like at K to 2 and 3 to 5 with examples, and then expanding on that. As countries establish new CS curriculum around the world for the primary years, there's also a need to understand what learning progressions look like for these learners at different stages and how to measure that growth over time. And we do have curriculum coming out which can provide a solid basis for that. And we can also build on and extend on the work by DeLisa and Grover, already started in computational thinking and programming. And there's many frameworks and tools out there. So we really recommended in the end separating the K to 2 from the 3 to 5 due to what we thought were some quite distinct differences in students' literacy and abilities, and really focusing on, how can we support those two different areas. So it could be conceptualising the different year level groupings according to their literacy, cognitive development, and looking at how we ensure that assessment is supported in particularly the early years. And also looking at different ways that we can monitor and assess student learning, because it's not all platform based. We're looking at teachers working in classrooms with tangible objects. They're doing a lot of observations. Their eyes are everywhere. So how can we observe and monitor and track students' progress in those early years? So this work's really limited to a small group of individuals with only one external from in Australia. But we really wanted to build on the incredible work being done within our community. And we really hope that this position paper provides, just a framework for having those conversations and looking to tackle K to 5 primary years assessment and evaluation. And by starting with what we felt were the fundamentals, despite all the priorities we had, we felt that working with the foundations of learning progressions, key assessment and evaluation categories, and leveraging the work that already exists, we felt that we could really continue to build a platform to support teachers in the K to 5 space, as well as emerging research. So we're quite keen to hear what you think as well. What do you think are the key challenges and priorities? What are you working on or would like to work on? And how can we really initiate and get some of these priorities off the ground, perhaps with such an international platform like this?